Welcome to Vendetta Sports Media. This is Eight Sided Freaks, and today it is myself and Jerry Walker talking some fights. And this week we have UFC Atlantic City, which is not the best fight card, but there are some intriguing fights, some big names, and one really important fight in the main event. So we are going to talk about those top three fights on UFC Atlantic City. And then from there, we're going to talk about some news. Last week, we're not going to touch on last week's fight card much. We will talk about the biting incident that happened on the prelims, give our thoughts on that. And then once we get through that, we have some news. It sounds like England is getting a UFC pay-per-view. We're going to give our thoughts on that and maybe some potential fights that could take place on that card. And then we have one fight that was announced that we'll give our thoughts on. And if we have time, depending on how long it takes us, we may give our thoughts on Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler potentially having their fight date announced, but not necessarily booked. It's not official. Give our thoughts on whether that's actually happening or not. So that is our tentative schedule for today's episode. Jerry, how you doing? Are you ready to talk some fights? What do you make of this UFC Atlantic card and some of the news that we have swirling around?
Oh, yeah, James, I'm pretty good. Missed last week's episode because I was out of town. So happy to be back and ready to talk some UFC. I'll say this card overall has some possible really good fights by some unknown guys for some sort of point. The main event, like you said, is going to be very significant. I'm curious to see how it works in the whole title picture in the women's flyweight division, just solely because we have, as you guys I think talked about last week, the Ultimate Fighter upcoming season being the two that are atop of the division and probably going to fight for the belt one more time in Valentina Shevchenko and the champion Alexa Grasso. But overall, I'm excited. Atlantic City will probably be a good crowd for it and should be a fun fight night.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of fighters from that area as well. Erin Blanchfield from Jersey. I believe sometimes I get confused with which fighters are from Jersey and which are from New York. But Erin Blanchfield from that region. Chris Weidman from that region. Vicente Luque was actually born in Jersey. I had no idea that was true. I saw that this week. Born in Jersey and grew up in Brazil. So Luque in the co-main actually has some ties to Jersey. And then Nursultan Rutsiboyev actually trains in Philly with the Philly boys. So he is not from Jersey, but fairly close there in Philly. So a lot of connections to that area on this week's card. And let's get right into the main event. And I have a take on this, and I don't know if it's a hot take, but in my opinion, Erin Blanchfield and Manon Fiorot are the two best women's flyweight fighters in the world. I think they're better than Grasso and Valentina. Like, I don't know if that's necessarily a hot take, but I think if you were to rank these fighters 1 through 4, I think Blanchfield and Fiorot 1 and 2, and if you wanted to tell me that maybe, a Natalia Silva or a Macy Barber should be in that conversation as well, I wouldn't necessarily hate you for that. But do you think I'm crazy for this take of Blanchfield and Fiorot being the two best fighters in this division?
Right this very second, I would probably agree with you that they are the two best fighters. Shevchenko seemed to have dropped off a little bit in her last couple fights. Grasso's looked good, but it hasn't been anything special by any means. That comes with getting older on the Shevchenko part and having fought so much and the toll on your body. But as far as Blanchfield goes and Fiorot, they just seem, I don't know, I'll say Blanchfield's side, she's 24. She's the same age I am, born in 99. She's not even at the peak of her career yet, not in her prime. Fiorot is experienced, but she also hasn't had as many fights as like the Shevchenko, so I can see that side of things. She's looked just as dangerous. Sure, her last fight was Rose, and it's not like she's finishing people. Her last 4 were all decisions, but she's still fighting the best of the best in that division. Jennifer Maia, Caitlin Chukagian, who's changed her name or married now, so it's a different last name, and then Rose Namajunas, who fought this past weekend and is now up to 7th in the women's rankings. So Both of them are very solid fighters. I'm curious to see what happens this weekend, but I also like the shout you gave for Macy Barber because she's on the rise as well.
Yeah. Macy Barber and Natalia Silva have both impressed me. And on this show, I think we've talked a lot about this division in the time that we've been doing this. And even if you go back to some of our daily show episodes, we've talked a lot about this division for some reason. And I think me, you, and Anthony have all been pretty high on fighters like Barber, like Blanchfield, like Fiorot. Like, these are all really, really good fighters. And in my opinion, like you said, I think Shevchenko has slipped a decent amount in comparison to her peak. And I think Grasso is a little bit one-dimensional to where maybe Grasso could go out there and strike with Fiorot. She has great boxing, but I don't know that she could grapple with Blanchfield, especially if Blanchfield gets on top. So I think there could be some interesting matchups here. And I also think these two have deserved or earned title fights. Like, when you look at Blanchfield and Manon Fiorot, these are not like two girls who got here beating like, I'm not sure that these, fighters are good. They're not beating like middle tier competition. They're like, Manon Fiorot beat, like you said, Chukagian and Rose, like two good wins in my opinion. And then Blanchfield beat Andrade and Paila Santos. And Santos has been cut, but in my opinion, she beat Shevchenko when they fought. And for those that do not know,
when did she get cut?
She got cut, I believe in December, I want to say.
Oh, okay.
So it was after the Blanchfield fight, and she's since signed with PFL, and they've got her booked to fight a girl that's 11-8. The PFL literally started the women's flyweight division just so they could sign Talia Santos and say they had one of the best women's flyweights in the world. Pretty PFL. I don't think it's a terrible decision on their part in terms of marketing, but I think Santos got cut for a lot of outside of the cage reasons, not for inside of the cage reasons. I don't want to go too in depth, but there are some news stories out there about her not paying coaches and being in legal trouble. I don't, that's not me saying that. There are other reporters reporting that. So her reasons for being cut are not performance-based. So good win for Blanchfield. And this is a 5-round fight. If that Santos fight was a 5-round fight, she probably finishes her in the 4th round. It looked like Blanchfield was really turning it up in those later rounds. So it looked like rounds 4 and 5 are going to be pretty clear Blanchfield. So I'm interested to see what Blanchfield looks like in a 5-round fight, because she's someone who really, really impressive with the cardio in 3 rounds. How does that work in 5 rounds? I think she'll be really, really solid in the cardio based off what we've seen. Obviously, don't have necessarily proof, and we haven't seen it, but based on what we've seen over 3 rounds, I'm optimistic that she becomes a cardio machine over 5. And then for Manon Fiorot, I'm also interested to see how she does over 5, because, like I said, I think these are the 2 best women in the world, but the one thing that can really screw with you is cardio. You can be as talented as you want, but if you can't go 5 rounds, chances are you're not going to be a champion. So that's one of the bigger tests we're going to get from these two this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, that 5-round fight question is probably the biggest thing for this one, is who's going to be able to step it up in the 4th and the 5th rounds, because I don't know if either of them will be able to finish the other, just because they are both so well-rounded at times that it's one of those things that cardio might be the winner. And I don't know who I'm giving the advantage to at the moment. We're still a few days out from the fight, so I got to watch a little bit more, study up a bit before I make my predictions as well. But it's one of those things that we've seen a fight in 3-round decisions, and both fighters look to be getting better as the fight goes on. 4th and 5th rounds, we could see some bangers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've looked into this fight quite a bit, and I think it's really, really close. I will pull the betting odds up, but I think the fight is a lot closer than the betting odds suggest. So let's see. DraftKings has it Blanchfield a minus 180 favorite, with Fiorot being the plus 150 underdog. I think it's closer than that. I think this is much closer to a pick'em. Blanchfield, the one thing that I don't like about her grappling, great grappler from top, takedowns a little questionable. Now, like you said, she's 24, and I don't think that's going to be a long-term concern. But when it comes to fighting on Saturday, Fiorot has shown some really good takedown defense and could cause problems for Blanchfield when she looks to get the fight to the ground. Fiorot will probably be a problem from the outside. I shouldn't say probably, will be a problem from the outside based on her striking. Really great straight shots, good counters, some nice kicks. So it's going to be a tough fight for Blanchfield, but I am going to pick Blanchfield because you said earlier, you said cardio probably wins this one, and I have a hard time saying that Blanchfield is at a cardio disadvantage, and maybe I'm wrong, but what we've seen from 3 rounds has been really impressive, and not only cardio, she pairs that with being really, really tough, really, really resilient. You know, when she's not getting takedowns, she doesn't give up. She finds a way to win from the clinch, and I think she could probably wear on Manon from the clinch. So I think she stays committed to her grappling, gets it to the clinch if she can't land takedowns, does enough damage from the clinch to win rounds, beat up on Fiorot a little bit to the body, and then pull ahead late in the fight. But I do think it's a really, really close fight, and I think a lot of people underestimate the defensive grappling of Manon and Fiorot because she has been really impressive in that area.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I'm also leaning towards Erin Blanchfield in this one. Just scrolling through some stuff. These two and Macy Barber are tied for the longest win streak in women's flyweight history at 6 fights each. One of them is going to go to 7 and move that much closer to being the record holder for longest win streak in the division. I do have a question though for you because we obviously have the Ultimate Fighter, the whatever season is it? What is it? 33?
Yeah, I think 32 or 33. At this point, the season is.
Yeah,
I lose track.
It doesn't matter at that point, but it's that. Does this mean that they're going to wait and have the winner of this possibly have to fight again before getting a title shot just because we don't know when that show is going to happen and when they're – I'm assuming they're going to have Grasso and Shevchenko fight at the end of it.
I think Grasso and Shevchenko fight at UFC 306 at the Sphere.
Mexican Day again.
I have a really hard time seeing the only Mexican champion not be on the Mexican Independence Day card. And I think they booked the Ultimate Fighter to really cement the fact that those two are not fighting until after that show, which coincidentally is probably going to end right around the time of 306. So I think it's going to actually lead into 306 very nicely for them. So I think those two fight at 306, and I think the winner sits out. If whoever wins this fight, I think both of these fighters earned a title fight.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if that last fight between Grasso and Shevchenko wasn't a draw, then I think one of these two is fighting for the title. We ultimately don't know who they would have gave the shot to. But this was really the way to keep them both busy when I think they both earned a title shot. So the winner of this, if they don't get a title shot, I'm not sure what else they would have to do. And you don't want to just burn all your challengers having them fight each other before they get to the belt. Imagine Blanchfield or Manon Fiorot win this fight and then say they beat Barber or Barber wins, but then that fighter fights for the belt and then say they have the belt. Now you're looking, well, do we want to do a rematch? I'd much rather see the fresh fight of, say Barber gets a title fight against Erin or Manon. Have that not be a rematch because they didn't rush a number one contender fight. So I'd say the winner just sits out, gets a shot. It'll probably be first quarter next year or maybe December, but December, January range. So that's my opinion. I'd love to hear yours because I was going to ask you the same question.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that the winner is going to sit out and wait for that fight. But what concerns me, or maybe not concerns, maybe worries me a bit more, is this is looking very similar to the men's flyweight picture at the time of Brandon Moreno and Davis and Figueiredo. Obviously, at that time, there weren't as many challengers that were deserving of a title shot as there are in the women's flyweight division. But there was a draw and a loss for the champion in the first 2 fights, comes back and gets a win. So they're 1-1-1 each, and then you have to do. I guess they had to do the 4th fight, which I can see that being something that happens here. Which then that puts this in an entire different picture of. Because I agree with you. I think both Blanchfield and Fiorot deserve a title shot. Macy Barber could even argue potentially for a title shot. I think she fights the loser of this, like you were saying. So one of those things that there are options, but I just think the way the UFC has been going in the last year and a half, 2 years, 3 years even, in terms of rematches for champions, that concerns me a little bit.
Yeah, that a four. I don't want to see a fourth fight between those
I don't
two,
either.
with all due respect.
No,
I think they should both come out and say winner takes all. Like, have that be part of the deal of the Ultimate Fighter. Winner takes all in this one. Like, I don't want to see a fourth fight, and if I'm being honest, I think Grasso is gonna win the third fight, and it
that it won't matter. So.
won't matter. But I could be wrong. I just think Grasso is trending upwards and Shevchenko's trending downwards, and now we're pushing that another year of one trending up and one trending down. Because even if you look at the first fight, Grasso didn't win any rounds. I don't think. Maybe she won one round before the rear naked choke, but she won the minutes a lot more in the second. Or she won 2 rounds pretty clearly in the second fight, which she wasn't clearly winning rounds in the first fight. She didn't get to finish, but winning rounds, I think, is a big indicator of where you are in terms of the talent between the two. And I think in the third fight, if it continues to trend towards Grasso, the younger fighter who's getting more experience than, but that's a whole another discussion at this point that we're probably going to have in months, because this fight's going to happen in months. So,
yeah. And then, I mean, if it does happen that they end up having to do a fourth fight, who knows what happens in this division? Because say Fiorot wins, she's 34 at the moment.
Yeah.
She'll be just getting older and older.
That's the only thing I don't love about Fiorot is her age. Like, if she was 28, this would be I'd be a lot higher on her, but the fact that she's 34 kind of sucks.
And then that's the other thing, I guess, that we both think this could very well be a pick'ems. I think we're both leaning Blanchfield, but if Fiorot was younger, this would be even more of a tough fight to pick because, they both have it to go still.
Mm-hmm. One last thing I'll add is that also makes this a much more important fight for Fiorot than Blanchfield.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if Blanchfield wins this fight, it's not like she's never going to be champion.
Yeah.
Like, I think if Blanchfield, what's Blanchfield going to look like in 3 years? Like, I assume she's going to get better. I think we've seen her get better in the UFC at this progression in her career already. So Blanchfield is probably going to fight for a title. Like, say worst case scenario, Blanchfield can't beat Shevchenko and Fiorot. She could age those two out. Like, there's a world where in 3 years, those two are out and Blanchfield's still at the top. So Blanchfield, much better position, makes this a much more crucial fight for someone who is much older in Fiorot.
Yeah, Blanchfield and Macy Barber are going to run this division for a while, I think.
And Natalia Silva.
Silva. Yeah.
That's why I like this division, because I like a lot of these fighters, and a lot of them are very, very young. So,
yeah.
All right, moving on down the card, Vicente Luque and Joaquin Buckley in the co-main event. This is not really a fight that I saw coming, but here, and to be fair, the original target was Sean Brady for this fight, and we ended up getting Joaquin Buckley, which I actually don't think is a bad fight, because Buckley, a guy with a big name, in terms of when he was unranked, he was fairly well known for being an unranked fighter. And he's moved down to welterweight, previously at middleweight, and I've liked what I've seen from him at welterweight. The problem for him at middleweight was that he was short, and he did not deal with distance well against tall guys who could kind of manage the range. Now he comes down to welterweight. It's not as big of a concern, and he's very powerful, and, putting in the extra work to get down to welterweight probably takes commitment, probably some extra laps. The cardios look good. And Luque has a really, really tough test for anyone at 170 pounds. So I think this is a really interesting fight, and I'll pull the odds on this one off the top. Right now, this one is pretty much a pick'em. There's a 115 on each side. Any bookie that gives you 115 on each side instead of 110 on each side, kind of a scummy move. Some have it at minus 110 a piece. Others, minus 118 on one side, minus 108 on the other. So very, very close wherever you look. What do you make of this matchup?
I think it's going to be a fun fight. I am curious to see how he does go, or Joaquin Buckley looks again in the welterweight division, because, like you said, he's had 2 fights since moving down, both wins, had a nice knockout and then a decision. But even looking at his losses, in the middleweight division. Chris Curtis, he's ranked 14th at the moment. Nazardini Yamavov, he's ranked 8th, I think, in the world. And then Kevin Holland as well. They're not bad losses in a difficult division. He is, like you said, the small guy. He's only 5'8", so he's still 3 inches shorter than Vicente Luque. And this is another one where I am probably going to pick Luque, but Luque's age is kind of concerning to me because he's only 32. It feels like he's been around much longer.
Yeah, he's 32, but he's 82 in fight years.
Yeah,
he's been in his fair share of wars and brawls.
He has 32 fights in 32 years, so it's
and he's not going out there and I'm gonna dance around on the outside, or I'm gonna take you down and absorb 8 strikes in a fight. He's biting down on the mouthpiece and swinging, which I love him for it, but that comes with consequences after a period of time, and that's kind of the period of time we're at where I'm concerned for him.
Yeah, and I think that could be the flaw of him in this fight, because Joaquin Buckley can knock people out from any way. We saw it with his highlight reel knockout of the year of why am I blanking on the guy's name?
Impa Kisanganaev.
Yeah, that spinning back kick after his leg got caught. So he can find ways to knock you out from any position. Because I think his next fight after that was a really nice knockout as well of Jordan Wright, I want to say. Yeah,
he knocked out Jordan Wright,
Yeah, so he came back with 2 good knockouts, and he can just finish you anywhere. And if Vicente Luque gets into a standing just brawl, throw it, and hope, he doesn't come out on top in this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is the thing I really struggled with when I was writing I already wrote the preview for this fight. That'll be out on Friday, but I already wrote the preview for this fight, and I don't know if Luque is going to grapple or not. Like, he grappled against RDA, and the thing about that fight was that RDA was the one who started all the grappling exchanges. Like, RDA would win the striking exchanges and then start grappling and then lose the grappling exchanges. And I vividly remember that because I picked RDA and I was sitting watching going, what in the hell are you doing? Strike. Yeah. And then he would attempt to take down, get reversed on the fence, and then get taken down himself. And I'm like RDA was the one initiating the grappling. So I don't know if Buckley is going to go out here and initiate grappling. Maybe he rewatches the RDA fight, or Luque does, and he decides, hey, I looked pretty good grappling RDA. I should go grapple Buckley. Like, maybe that's the thought process, and that'd be really, really smart. But it's like, I don't really know what his game plan is going to be. And Buckley can grapple. I've actually been impressed with his kind of progression in terms of being a counter grappler and being a guy who all of a sudden started attempting his own takedown. So I think he's grown as a grappler, but I don't know that he's at the level of Luque. He may be defensively responsible enough, but Luque, worst case scenario, still has an elite Darce choke and can go out there and choke you out with that. So it's a very, very interesting matchup, but I'm excited for that because I think this is going to be a good fight. And if they do stand and trade, Luque is historically not as good against southpaws, so that kind of even the playing field even more for Buckley. When you look at Luque's losses, Bilal Muhammad, Jeff Neal, both southpaws. RDA southpaw, like I just said, RDA was having success on the feet. So I think Buckley could have success on the feet as well.
Yeah, it's still an interesting one because even as we were talking before, I know Sean Brady was originally meant to be the fight made here, but this just seemed like a kind of out of left field fight to be made. I didn't think Buckley would be the guy stepping in to fight Vicente Luque. I thought he would get someone else in that top, maybe even a ranked fighter, maybe a rematch with Chiesa, but maybe that's the thing. Maybe he just wanted to fight someone new on the Luque side. So I'm here for it. Yeah. If Buckley does get the win, then he hops into the rankings. If Luque gets the win, he solidifies himself as a top 15 guy at the moment and kind of deserves a higher ranked guy maybe.
Yeah, it is a very interesting fight from a matchmaking perspective because I don't hate the idea of Buckley fighting someone ranked. It just feels like he skipped that 15 to 10 range.
Yeah.
It feels like he skipped that. Like, he could have fought Chiesa, who's not ranked anymore, I guess. Or he could have fought Magny or someone, in that range before getting to a Luque. But when he took it on, I wasn't short notice, but he wasn't the number one choice. You can move up the rankings a lot faster if you're willing to say yes in not ideal circumstances, which he did. So credit to him and move up. And Luque, wasn't expecting this fight for him either. Like you said, thought it would be someone ranked. Original opponent was Sean Brady. So like, that's a very interesting matchup. But another one that really piques my interest from how it's going to go down. So I do like this fight.
Absolutely. And I mean, looking at the guys ranked below Vicente Luque, Kevin Holland would have made sense, but they've already fought. So maybe a rematch there could have happened because that was at middleweight and that was in Buckley's UFC debut. So a lot has changed since then. Maybe that would have been one that would have made more sense to happen. Whatever happens, happens. He's getting Vicente Luque, and it's a big chance for him.
Yep, exactly. Then the last fight we're going to talk about on this card is Chris Weidman and Bruno Silva. Where to start here? I guess the first thing I want to ask is, do you think Chris Weidman should be fighting
No.
in the UFC? I won't say professionally, I'll say in the UFC. I think that has been a point of discussion since his last fight, and honestly, since his leg break against Uriah Hall. He did return and fight Brad Tavares, lost that fight, but where do you sit on Chris Weidman at this point in his career?
Well, the two of these fighters combined over their last however many fights are 3-11. So I'm not sure either of them should probably be in the UFC anymore.
And I think that is loser goes home type fight here.
Yeah, I think it is as well.
Both 1-4 in the last 5. I think it's to Weidman, it's, hey, if you can't beat this guy, you need to retire. And for Silva, it's, hey, if you can't beat the guy who just broke his leg, we don't need you anymore.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, I mean, Weidman's 39, Silva's 34, so it's not like they're really, either of them are going to fight for a belt anytime soon, if ever again, unless something crazy happens, which possible, but not probable. I don't know what to expect from this fight. I really don't, because it's two guys that have just been looking terrible as of late, that it's like anything can happen. For all I know, this could be a snooze fest, and they kind of just stand around and jab at each other for 15 minutes. I don't think it will be. I think something will happen, but don't know what yet.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't want to be too hard on Weidman because like he didn't look great in his last fight.
Yeah.
But he was fighting a guy that is like has very, very good takedown defense. Like Brad Tavares, I believe, has over a 90% takedown defense just purely looking at stats. The eye test holds it up. I don't think Chris Weidman landed a single takedown in that fight. And Brad Tavares kicks the legs very, 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 very well. So it was like a nightmare matchup to Weidman too. I didn't really think it made sense for the return because it was a guy who could expose stylistically, it was a really bad matchup. So I don't know how to rate him based off what we saw in that fight, knowing it was his return from injury and knowing it was a bad matchup. Like now, I'm not saying Bruno Silva is a layup because Bruno Silva could be 0-10 in his last 10, and he probably still is going to have knockout power in his hands.
And his one win in his last 5 was Brad Tavares.
Yes. So like he hits very hard. That'll probably hold for the rest of his career, no matter how many fights he's losing. And Chris Weidman looked pretty, I don't want to say looked terrible in his last fight. He looked tough. But if you zoom out a little bit, you go back to prior to the Uriah Hall fight, he was getting knocked out fairly routinely, knocked out by Dominic Reyes, knocked out by Jacare. Like he was getting knocked out before he even injured his leg. So I don't know. Maybe the time off helped his chin. I don't even know. So I'm kind of just waffling here, but I think that is kind of a fair reflection of what to make of this fight. Like it doesn't really make much sense, and trying to make sense of it is not that easy, to be honest.
No, it's honestly, the more you think about the sense of it, the more confused you can end up getting in this one. I have no idea which way this is going to go. It's like I said, it could go either way. Mm-hmm. I'm probably leaning towards Silva at the moment, but that's just give me an hour or so and I might be leaning Weidman. It's one of those things that I really don't know what to expect.
Yeah. I don't really want to pick Weidman at this point in his career. Don't really want to pick Silva at this point in his career. So you're in between a rock and a hard place. But like, I'll probably pick Silva just because he does still hit hard, and maybe Weidman goes out there, takes him down several times, and maybe he even submits him from top. And I wouldn't be overly shocked because I don't think Silva's ground game is that great, but I also would be kind of shocked to see Weidman win a fight. So I say we just leave it there because, like you said, the more you try and make sense of this, the more confused you get. But didn't want to completely cut it out of the episode because it is a former champion and Weidman has been through a lot. So I honestly probably will be rooting for Weidman just because of the things he has been through. All right. Now we're not going to talk about this most recent card, but there is one little thing we have to talk about.
While we're talking on this, or on the previous card, I just want to give one final thought on that.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Herbert Burns, after he got rocked and carried out in his last fight, I'm curious to see what happens. Because he kind of just gave up in that fight. So
yeah, it was a shock to see Herbert Burns on this weekend's upcoming card. Yes, and he got carried out of the act. For those who have not seen Herbert Burns' last fight, go watch it.
Yeah,
it is something. You'll never see anything like it ever again, unless he does it again this week. So,
I was at that one. That was the Bill Algeo fight, wasn't it?
Yep. Yeah, and he got carried out by Big Brother Gilbert because he got tired, and then he was so tired that he didn't want to make it seem like he quit. So that he just laid there and didn't get up and made it seem like he had like an injury, and then he got carried out of the octagon, and it was a mess. But it is comedy.
It was indeed. Between him and if you followed this show back to probably the Daily Show days, which I'm not sure if anyone has, there's a guy who we talk about with probably the weirdest nickname in Anton Turkalji, the Pleasure Boy. Anytime he fights, you have to throw that one out there.
Yes, the Pleasure Man is a weird character. And not only does he have a weird nickname, he says very weird things, posts very weird things on his Instagram. He has an OnlyFans. I'm not subscribed, so I'm not sure what he does on it.
Really?
I know some fighters have OnlyFans and they like post like training footage and stuff like that. Other fighters have OnlyFans and they do OnlyFans activities. Yeah. I'm not sure where Anton Turkalji falls on the spectrum. I could see either way based off of him being that. He's that type of guy. He's a weird fellow. So I like those shout outs. I will also shout out Nate Landwehr. Guaranteed entertainment, and that will probably be a good fight as well.
One other thing, I just saw some news just scrolling through Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Luke Rockhold's fighting on 420 in karate combat against Joe Schilling.
Really?
Yes.
Now,
former UFC champion there.
I will say this. I don't know if I love karate combat, but it's fun. It's a good time. For those who have not watched karate combat, I recommend it. Don't watch it to expect a the greatest MMA or the greatest. It's not even MMA. It's karate combat. It's its own rule set. But it's in they call it the pit. It's not an octagon. They have like people like mat side. It's like kind of like a basketball game and having people right there. And they had one event and it was they had it at like a mansion in Miami and it got shut down by the cops because it went too late. And karate combat is like comedy mixed with combat sports. Luke Rockhold is the perfect type of guy for it. So that's hilarious, to be honest.
I thought I just said that. And fighting on 420, it's in Abu Dhabi, bro.
Oh, it's in Abu Dhabi.
It was either Abu Dhabi or Dubai.
Oh, man, that's hilarious. I will be watching. You know what? If anyone's a fan of karate combat, consider it me. Yeah. I'll call myself a fan. I enjoy it. So
wasn't the one in Miami hosted by like Rick Ross or something?
Yes, yeah. It was.
It's something else.
It's a mess, and you get like distracted because you're looking off into the crowd and you're going, I know that guy. Why is that random celebrity in the
Just
front row of a karate combat? And the one that was the house party in Miami, they had people walking out of a house. Like they were training in like a spare bedroom, and
yeah.
then they would walk through the kitchen, and it
Walk
was
through
like
the
walking through
back.
a house party to get to the little place where you fight. Half the people weren't even paying attention.
No,
It is hilarious.
it's crazy. Just thought I had to throw that one out there.
No, you don't. Anytime you want to talk about karate combat, you just let me know because it's a good time. Now this next one, it's another little fun topic. Well, fun, not fun, depending on who you were in the situation. Igor Severino fought Andre Lima over the weekend, and I don't know if I'm allowed to throw the picture up on the screen. I won't because I think there's some sort of copyright there with UFC. But
Go look it up.
you go look it up. Igor Severino bit Andre Lima. When I say bit, he had him in the back in like a mat return position and just dug his teeth directly in to the kind. It was it. I guess it was more on the tricep, but the mark is kind of on the inside of the arm, right about here. He bit the living shit out of him. You could see teeth marks on the guy's skin. Probably almost drew blood.
Yeah.
Igor Severino gets disqualified. Then this kid Andre Lima gets a bonus for getting bit, 25,000, gets a tattoo, and then gets another 25,000. And it just ended up being a crazy scenario. What do you make of this whole situation here with the bite from Severino and Lima's bonus?
That's some karate combat shit right there. Put it that way.
It is. That's a great way to put it.
It's crazy. Sure, every once in a while this happened. Obviously, Mike Tyson did it, but that was less blatant maybe at the time. Sure, I guess he got part of his ear off, so there was no bite mark, but there's that aspect. But what are you doing? You just straight up thought like, oh, this guy looks like a snack. I'm gonna just munch on him. It's like Luis Suarez, and so I'm a big soccer guy. Luis Suarez, when he would bite people playing, I don't know what just gives you the urge to just bite somebody as a grown man, and it's just weird.
And biting is such a bad foul that it was like one of the original rules in MMA.
The only two rules I think were no biting and no eye gouging. That's about it.
Yeah. It was like they were like, all right, we need some rules for this crazy thing we're going to do. And the first one they did was, all right, no biting. That's insane. You can't bite someone in a fight. That was the number one thing. He broke the number one rule of MMA. Do not bite him. The one thing you can't do is do not bite him. And he bit him. Do you think he should have got cut? Because the UFC did cut him. Do you agree with the decision to cut him from the promotion?
I mean, if you're breaking the number one rule in the UFC, it's hard to come back from that. No one's going to want to fight him because they're like, oh, shit, he might bite me now also. Which, depending on how you're looking at it, hey, maybe a free win. Get in there, be like, just leave your arm hanging a bit. I don't know what Igor was like before. I don't know what his record was professionally and up until this fight. I wasn't watching this fight this past weekend, so I don't know. But if you're biting someone, I think you should be cut one way or
another. This was his UFC debut, and he was 20 years old. Got a contract on Contender Series.
Okay.
I think he should be cut, but I wouldn't be opposed to a second chance.
I agree.
Like, he's 20. Like, bring him back when he's 23 or 24 and has more regional fights under his belt. That being said, no more biting. You bite again, then it's all right. You're done forever. But the guy's 20. Like, he's younger than both of us. Like, and he was already in the UFC. Like, and I don't think just because you're 20, you get a free pass to bite people. But go and get, 3 years of regional experience and maybe even win on Contenders again. Like, I wouldn't hate the idea of bringing him back. But I do think he needs to earn it. And when he comes back, be on a short leash.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, looking at his stats, this was the first and only loss of his career so far. So he is a relatively promising fighter. So I like that shout, possibly giving him a second chance down the line, as long as he can abide by the rules. And maybe that's what something happens. Like you said, he's 20. He's a young kid. Maybe something just happened and he just lost focus, lost control, and just did that. But,
yeah. Also, before we get off this topic, I do want to shout out Andre Lima because I do think he looked really good in that fight, and I really liked him on Contender as well. So I actually think he could be a good fighter, and I don't think this is going to be the last time we're talking about Lima. A lot of promising stuff that he does in there. He's 25, another young guy, but I like what I saw from him and think he could be pretty good as well. So I want to shout out his actual skills because I think his skills are really being swept under the rug because insane situation, right? The leading news story is going to be him getting bit, but I do also want to say, hey, really good fighter. I think that we have here.
yeah.
All right. Now this was like I said at the beginning of the episode, we have some news on a UFC pay-per-view going down in England. The date wasn't revealed. It sounds like they're probably going to announce a date relatively soon. There's been some moving and shaking with some of these UFC events right now. I think the last one that they have booked and like we know the date and numbered card is UFC 303 in Las Vegas, and then I think 304 and 305 are unbooked, and they got to figure out where the date and location of those. Sounds like one of these cards is going to be in England. So what do you make of the UFC returning to England, and what is a fight or some fights that you would like to see on that card?
Oh, I love it whenever the UFC goes anywhere out of the country. Apart from at this moment, I think they've gone to Abu Dhabi a few too many times. I don't think the crowd's as exciting as, say, in England, or France. Even there's talks of going to Spain. I think that would be an electric atmosphere.
Singapore was great. Singapore was great as well.
Brazil, whenever they go down there, it's a good time. Even seemed like Mexico was a blast the other day. No bottles and stuff were thrown this year, so always a win. But I'm excited for this. No matter what it is, where it is, I'll be watching one way or another. And usually, I know it's going to be interesting because it's a pay-per-view, but an early morning card that they would have for one of the last England fight nights, it was early. So I woke up and started watching UFC, which don't tempt me with a good time doing that. And there are some interesting fighters to be in this. I would assume we're going to have Leon Edwards, the welterweight champion at the moment, fighting as the main event. We talked before, and I think it's going to be Bilal Muhammad. Seems like the one that they want to give the shot to. Sure, he wasn't offered at 300, but that's because, as we said, I don't think anyone wanted Bilal to be on 300. After that, though, I'm torn because Tom Aspinall is currently the heavyweight interim champion. I think he really deserves a shot at the actual belt of the winner of John and Stipe, but at the same time, both of them might never fight. They both might retire after. So it's one of those things that I could see him fight, and I think if he did, Cyril Gane's the fight to make. I know Cyril Gane seems like he's always fighting for a belt or an interim belt one way or another, but why not? He's already beat Pavlovich. In terms of Aspinall's beat Pavlovich, beat Volkov, Curtis Blades. He could potentially fight after he went out and beat Almeida, but I still think he beats Blades. So,
yeah, I disagree with you. I don't think Tom should. Or I don't know if you said you think Tom should fight, but I don't think he should fight.
Oh, I don't think he should. I think he should wait because it's a lose-lose situation for him.
Yeah.
Either you go in and you're fighting a meaningless fight, you're risking too much.
Yeah. I said this after the Blades fight, but I don't think Tom should defend the interim belt because defending a belt is the hardest thing to do in the sport. Like, it's harder to do. I guess it kind of depends on who you're fighting, but defending a belt is hard. And in my opinion, the number one factor for being an all-time great is how many times did you defend that belt, and probably on the same tier as that is who did you beat. But how many times did you defend the belt is the number one criteria, in my opinion, for a legacy. That's why guys like John Jones, GSP, Silva, DJ, that's why they all have great legacies because they defended the belt forever. and you're losing a title defense on the interim belt when you're the best heavyweight in the world, and the two guys who are gonna fight, he's not even like, in my opinion, Tom's getting heavily disrespected by the fact that I don't even think the Stipe fight should happen. Like
Yeah.
the Stipe versus John, no one wants to see that, and they're doing Stipe a solid, which I respect, but once you put the interim belt on the line, the interim belt's on the line, and the meaning is you fight the champ when the champ's ready to go. And that's not the respect that they're giving Aspinall. So I don't see any need for him to defend that. Get better in the shadows. And if John and Stipe both retire, they retire. But if not, John versus Stipe is the fight that needs to be made if John doesn't retire. And there's no reason to potentially waste a shot at John Jones for a fight against Curtis Blades or Cyril Gane.
Yeah,
I just think it's ridiculous.
And we already saw what John did to Cyril Gane. I don't think that fight goes any differently a second time through.
Mm-hmm.
One of those things that, like, I think the fight, like you said, Stipe hasn't fought since 21.
And he got knocked out in that fight.
Yeah, knocked out cold by Francis.
With all due respect, because Stipe is a great guy, great champion, but the longer you put someone on ice who's in their 40s, the worse it is.
Yeah,
like it's point blank period. He's in his 40s. Like at least John's 35 or 36 maybe at this point, but he was 35 when he fought. Like Stipe is in his 40s. It's crazy. And I will say I'd rather see Curtis than Cyril Gane. Cyril Gane, like, how do I say this without being too disrespectful to Cyril Gane? Cyril Gane has, every time he's been in an advantageous position, he has never done anything for someone else behind him in the rankings.
What?
Tom Aspinall was in the front row in Paris wanting to do a face-off with Cyril Gane when Gane fought Spivak. And Tom actually said, I'll fight the winner. I don't care if it's Spivak or Gane. So it wasn't just exclusive to Gane. Yeah. He would have got in there and done the face-off with Spivak, which, I mean, that says about anything you need to know about Tom. And Cyril didn't give him the opportunity. And then, Gane screwed himself, because if they do that face-off, guess who gets to call the fight UFC 295 for the interim belt? It would have been Gane. But instead, Gane is so far, believes he's so much better than everyone else that he would only fight Stipe or John after he got mauled by John, and only wants to fight for belts and only wants to fight those two. I don't know what he did to earn that.
Beating Sergey Spivak, I don't think could get more.
Exactly. Tom beat Spivak years ago.
Yeah.
It was like, and no one gave it. No one cared. So, and Gane also, when Curtis said, hey, I'd like to fight Gane, and Curtis has been perpetually ranked in the top 5 for years, Gane said no because he didn't want to fight a grappler. So, if Gane doesn't want to give other guys opportunities, I'm not sure why he keeps getting opportunities. I'd much rather give the shot to Curtis. Even if, hey, I don't think Curtis is anything special, but at least he was willing to give Almeida a shot. Like, you think Gane would have accepted a fight with Almeida? I don't think so. So that's my opinion on Cyril Gane. And he seems like a great guy. Like, he seems like a cool guy to hang out with, but I don't like the way that he approaches his career with who he will fight and who he won't. So
not at all. And I mean, I kind of wish that Aspinall and Gane fight had happened, because I think Aspinall would have whooped him.
Yeah, me too. I think he subs him
in the first round.
Yeah.
Or if he doesn't sub him, he finishes him like he did Pavlovich.
Volkov's a better grappler than Gane by a pretty decent margin.
Yeah.
And he subbed Volkov in the first round, so I'm with you. I think Aspinall. I think Curtis is probably a tougher fight.
Yeah, I think Aspinall will end up fighting, though, in England, just because I think he wants to fight and he doesn't care who it is. He's not worried about fighting anyone. But there are a couple other fighters that I want to just throw out there for England card. Starting with Michael Venom Page. I think he came out, did his stuff against Kevin Holland. Getting him a fight with anyone, I'll say the Ian Gary fight intrigues me so much, just because of all the England-Ireland rivalry there. Mm-hmm. If they were to do that in England, that would be insane.
Yeah, and while we're on the topic, Ian Gary said, well, I want to fight Michael Venom Page because he's ranked below me. Come on. What are we doing?
Some of these guys got such big egos.
Yeah.
That's like, and sure, Ian Gary might deserve a guy like Colby Covington, who maybe. He doesn't deserve anyone in the top 3, I'll tell you that much.
According to Ian, Colby isn't accepting the fight. So what's the hold up on fighting someone else? It's crazy. And here's the last thing I'll say. I don't want to get too deep into bashing fighters because I really don't like it, but some of the way that these guys approach their career is crazy. The one thing that guys ask is, what's the number next to my name? The number they need to be concerned about is, how many fights am I away from a title?
Yep.
Like, that's ultimately the more important number, is how many fights am I away from gold, and what do I need to do to decrease that number? Tom Aspinall, great example, a guy who went out there, beat Tybura, and put himself in a position to decrease the number of fights he needed to fight for the belt with the guys he called out, the way he called them out, and the way he approached his career. Other guys don't do that same thing, and they don't understand why they don't get big fights because they're asking the wrong questions. Seems like that's what Ian's doing now, but
similar guy in terms of taking his time and doing it the right way is Leon Edwards. Throw him out there as well. If he fought anybody he could and worked his way up. Bilal Muhammad, another one who's talking the talk, but he isn't necessarily doing the right stuff at times, and that's why he hasn't had a title fight yet. He probably will at the UFC England card, but don't know.
Yeah.
There was one other guy I wanted to throw out, possibly two. I don't know what's going to happen with Arnold Allen. He's lost his last 2 fights, so he might be slipping down a bit. But Muhammad Makayev, I would like to see, because technically he's mixed nationalities, but he has fights under the English flag. So that would be another one to have there. I could see him fight maybe a guy like Kai Kara-France. If Kara-France is coming back to the UFC anytime soon, it's one of those things, because Manel Kape, Nicolau, the 2 guys ranked ahead of Makayev are fighting each other. I don't know. Maybe Amir Albazi would be a fight, but I think Albazi thinks he should fight for the belts. One of those things.
Don't get me started on that.
I'm just putting that. We've had this discussion before, but I think a fight like that would be a fun one. Kai Kara-France and Muhammad Makayev would be entertaining.
I'll throw out there Royval as well. I'd like to see Royval and Makayev in maybe a number 1 contender spot. The only thing I don't like about that being on that pay-per-view is that I'd love that to be 5 rounds. I'd like to see, that's another thing of, like, we talked about this earlier with Blanchfield and Manon Fiorot, is, hey, if this is going to be a number 1 contender, or it is a number 1 contender spot, and the 5-round cardio is important. And I think Makayev and Royval, if they're fighting to fight for a title, should be fighting 5 rounds. Maybe they make that call and have that a 5-round fight on a pay-per-view, call it a contenders fight. But I do think that should be a 5-round fight. That's the only, I 100% agree with you. Makayev in England, great fight and great idea. I just would like to see him in a 5-rounder, and I hope they do that on a pay-per-view, honestly.
I get that. That'd be a good one. I mean, maybe a co-main if they don't go with the Tom Aspinall fight. So, do you think we'll see a return of Paddy Pimblett?
I do. I would assume so.
I would think so. Well, he's been out for a while.
Yeah, and the guy that a lot of people wanted was he fought in December. He fought Tony.
Oh, right.
I don't know how much you want to count that as.
I kind of completely forgot about that fight.
I have no clue who he's going to fight because Renato Moicano has really been angling for that fight, but they gave him Jalen Turner instead, UFC 300. And
he wants money.
Yeah. And Bobby Green is always a guy that I thought they would book Paddy against because I think that's a good matchup for him in the rankings. Maybe they turn around Bobby Green and the winner of Bobby Green and Jim Miller because that would probably be the easiest ranked fight that you could get for Paddy, knowing that Paddy's not that good and probably loses to a lot of ranked fighters. Maybe those are 2 guys that he could beat. Maybe a Beneil Dariush, and they just pray that Beneil Dariush's chin is just dust and Paddy catches him. But it's going to be hard to find an opponent for Paddy, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think he'd end up fighting someone outside of the rankings. Because even looking at from 11 to 15, he's not going to fight Saint Denis. Not going to fight LBA. Could you imagine that? Oh, my God. The things
Saint Denis would kill him. I know suddenly people think Saint Denis is bad because he lost to Poirier, but he had a staph infection on his head. It's like, all right, come on.
Poirier's been the top of the division for a reason for so long.
He was Saint Denis was dominating that fight, but that's a whole nother.
He loses to those two. Moicano potentially, but that fight won't happen because he's fighting Jalen Turner.
Moicano's got a bad chin, but I think this Patty hits hard. Though, like I don't really love Patty, but he does hit hard to where if you give him a guy with a good, bad chin, he's got to punch his chins.
A Drew Dober fight would be intriguing, but I still think Dober probably beats him. But
I think Dober probably chins him.
Yeah,
Patty's there to be hit, and I'm not sure you want to get hit by Drew Dober.
No. So, are there any other ones? Just while we're on the UFC England, is there any other fighters or people you think should be fighting on that card?
Yeah, my big one is Arnold Allen. You mentioned it earlier. I know he's lost his last two, but like, I think Arnold Allen is very, very good. Like Holloway, I'll never disrespect anyone for losing to Holloway, and he was far more competitive with Holloway than Cater, and he was far more competitive with Holloway than the Korean Zombie. So that to me was, you can lose to Holloway in a close decision. I'm not going to hate you for that. I'd like to see him fight Yair Rodriguez. That's the fight I think they need to make. Yair and Arnold Allen both have gotten to the top of the division, ran into some struggles. I think they should book that fight. And I also saw rumors of Giga Chikadze versus Arnold Allen, that fight was in the works. Those are often BS. Sometimes they're true, sometimes they're BS. But that's not a terrible idea either. I do like that fight. So those are some names I would like. And if they're fighting in England, I'd really like to see Arnold Allen because I think he's one of the more talented and more exciting fighters from that country. And featherweight's a great division. And you give me a top 10 ranked featherweights against one another, I'm not going to complain.
No, not at all. And I do have just one final point on the England card. As we've talked before, they're opening a new arena, probably one of the bigger arenas in Manchester. It's going to hold like 21 to 23,000 people. Guy from there, obviously Tom Aspinall's from there, but Leron Murphy, maybe give him a fight. Hometown kid in the hometown arena, something like that.
Yeah, unfortunately, they just booked him against Barboza yesterday.
Oh, they did? Oh, okay.
Yeah, he got a fight with Barboza literally yesterday or maybe the day before. But
so that won't happen. But.
Yeah. He got a main event against that's going to be an Apex main event. So it's a really good fight and a good fight for him in terms of
that'll be
moving up the rankings.
That will be a good fight. So
any other shout outs on this England pay-per-view before we touch up on some of this other news?
Shocking turn of events. Molly McCann fights for the belt. Or actually, no, here's the crazy one. Paddy Pimblett and Ilia Topuria settled their arguments in their long-time dispute. I can't believe that was a debate at one point in time.
Yeah, people thought Paddy would beat Ilia Topuria. I don't see those people speaking much anymore about that. That'd be a good way to get you there. Paddy Pimblett hype. Absolutely stopped and.
Or he backs it up and comes out of nowhere and finishes Topuria. Yeah, no.
Oh man, I'd probably stop watching the UFC if that happened. I'd probably just be done. You wouldn't hear from me again.
The show would officially cease.
Yeah, there'd be no point anymore. It'd be just pointless. Yeah. All right. 58. We're at 58 minutes. There are a couple other things I want to touch on quickly. Alexander Volkov got booked to fight Jailton Almeida. UFC, I want to say this was 303. I'd have to double check that, but it will be a pay-per-view, and I believe it is. Or maybe it was 302. Regardless, it's either 302 or 303. What do you make of this fight? Because I was very surprised to see this, so I wanted to get your thoughts on it.
I just looked up. It is 302, but this...
Thank you.
I don't know. This fight intrigues me. Because Almeida looked really, really good in that first round against Curtis Blades. I'm not sure he's going to be able to do the same thing against Volkov because Volkov is that much bigger. And as you said earlier when we were talking about Aspinall and Volkov is very good on the ground as well. That was Almeida's specialty. So this could be very much a grappling fight. Maybe Almeida gets something done, but it's one that I don't know. because it makes sense for Volkov a little bit, but I don't think Almeida deserves to fight a guy ahead of him after he just got knocked out cold by Blades. And honestly, I hate saying this, but he looked like he kind of gave up in that Blades fight. Once he
I
got
agree with that.
hit a couple times, he just stopped even trying to protect himself and got out of there. So it's one of those things I don't know if he deserves after that performance to fight a guy who's ranked a spot ahead of him.
Yeah, it's. I agree with you. It's the thing that I don't like doing, but sometimes fighters quit in there. And I think listen, when he fell to the ground, he was facing the ground like this, face pointing downwards, and then he flips over and goes like this. Like if he was out, like he would have fell face down. Like it's very clear he was going, all right, I've had enough. Once again, I don't like saying the guys quit because it takes a lot to even get in there in the first place. And, I wouldn't want to get hit in the face by Curtis Blades. So with that being said, he's a great grappler and maybe out grapples Volkov. But what happens if Volkov's defending a shot and decides to take his elbow and give him some sideways elbows to the ear? Is Jailton going to go, well,
there we go again.
I gave it around. I gave it around to dominant grappling, and that's what I had.
But I will say, looking at it on the other side of things for Almeida, if he comes out and bounces off the first, I want to say that was the first loss of his career, maybe second against Blades. If he comes back and beats a guy like Volkov,
yep,
that's a statement win.
It is.
Immediately puts him right back in that picture.
Yeah, and for Jailton, he's a guy, former 205er, who bulked up to fight at heavyweight.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was the right decision in hindsight, because I think he would have a more success fighting elite 205ers, but he could routinely beat, these guys 7-15 in the rankings. Maybe you say, struggles with the top 5. But like if you go out there and beat Volkov, like Volkov has looked impressive, and he's a guy who's very, very big for heavyweight. It's not like he's a guy who's walking around at 250. Like maybe he does, but he's 6'7", fairly muscular. Like Volkov is a big guy for that division, and someone who's hard to just muscle around. So if he goes out there and gets it done, utmost respect to him, because it's not easy to go out there and get wins over guys like that.
And I mean, I could see this being a similar path that Tom Aspinall took. He went out and beat Volkov and suddenly shot up the rankings to a interim championship, something like that, after he did lose to Curtis Blades as well. So similarities there. Just something else I want to just put there.
Yeah, and maybe this quitting against Curtis Blades was a one-time thing.
Yeah.
It's Charles Oliveira was labeled as a quitter early in his career. Maybe Jailton Almeida has a similar revival, because honestly, if he doesn't quit in that spot, it's a very, like, based off what we saw in the first round, maybe he goes out there, ragdolls him for another round, gets a decision win, and all of a sudden looks great. So I don't want to cast him off completely for his career as a whole based off that performance. So
absolutely,
yeah, still a very talented guy.
Yeah, and still has a couple ranked wins as well. So it's not like he's fighting nobodies. And Curtis Blades I'll put him in similarity. He's like the Dustin Poirier. Poirier's gotten some title shots, I guess. Blades has never quite made it there, but he constantly has seemed like he's in that top 5 of heavyweight. Just always that odd man out. Anytime he gets one shot away, he falters.
Yeah. Lots of respect to Blades. Poirier I think you're being a little bit nice to him there.
That might be a little too nice.
But I agree with the point you're making, that it's not like he's a bum.
Yeah.
Right? He's got a lot of great wins in that division. Beat Volkov as well. So it's like he's also beat great fighters in that division. So it's not like he went out there and lost to a guy who's washed or a guy who's
comparison to Poirier might have been a little bit of a stretch, but
still, point behind it, I agree with. Yeah. Last thing for today, and we don't have to go too in depth on this because this has been something that has been talked about endlessly. But Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler have both seemingly said, hey, we're fighting June 29th. I found it interesting that Chandler said that. It wasn't just Conor. There were also points where, hey, they were going to fight at Madison Square Garden. Hey, they were going to fight in December. Do you think this is actually going to happen this time?
No, I've been vocal about this for the last month or 2 months. Every time this comes up on the show, I'm still on the side of I don't think this fight ever happens. They both said they were going to fight last summer or last fall. Then it got pushed to last winter. Now it's pushed to earlier this year. Now it's God knows when. Now it's June. I don't think this fight ever happens.
Fair
And
enough.
I think both of them have too much going on outside, or at least in Connor's standpoint. And hey, I might be wrong. He's now got his movie out, so maybe he's done with all that stuff, and he actually just wanted to get back into the fighting thing. I just don't see it happening.
I'm optimistic this time. Now,
Okay.
am I optimistic and correct, or am I optimistic and delusional? We're gonna have to find out. But I am actually kind of optimistic that this fight gets booked this time around. And it was more the reaction from Chandler that kind of was. I was like, oh, hold on a second, because Chandler in an interview was like, yeah, we're fighting. Had the biggest grin on his face, like he looked like someone just gave him the best news of his life. That's why I'm more optimistic. Because Chandler was really excited about it. And
I haven't seen that interview of him saying it. I just saw that he had said that they were both fighting.
Yeah, and this is also this is the date that Conor originally said. Conor did this little thing. Oh, on New Year's, on the first day of the new, maybe it was the 31st, the first. He was like, "I'm dropping the date we're gonna fight," and he said he didn't say 300. He said, "Oh, we're fighting International Fight Week, June 29th," and that's the same date that they're throwing out now. So maybe I'm delusional,
Maybe it is.
but
Let's see.
Chandler's reaction did have my interest peaked. And I will say, I did watch Roadhouse, and
Was it any good?
it's a bad movie, but it's one of those bad movies where it's like, hey, this is funny. Like,
Okay.
I had a good time watching it, but I'm not going to say it's a good movie because it was.
So worth checking out for the entertainment standpoint.
If you understand what you're getting yourself into, like, hey, this is Conor McGregor playing a absolutely insane person in a movie, and it's going to be kind of funny. And then the other parts of the movie are like one of those where you see it and you like laugh at because it's like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I had a good time. Not a spoiler, but potentially a spoiler depending on how you view things. Very first time you see Conor McGregor on screen, he's walking around bare ass out, and it's like, where the hell did this come from? So that's what you're getting yourself into. It's just absolutely ridiculous. The first time you see Conor is walking around naked through a town. It's like, what in the hell is going on?
Sounds about right.
Yeah, that's kind of a teaser of what you get yourself into if you watch it.
Fair enough. I will watch it at some point.
I did enjoy it. So
yeah. Do you think, just my question for you all in terms of all this McGregor Chandler fighting, do you think Conor has any chance? I know we're a long way. You do?
Yeah, I do. I think I think he wins.
Really?
As long the caveat is Michael Chandler could land one overhand or he could land one big takedown and Conor says, I got too much money in the bank for this.
Yeah.
That's a real possibility. But as long as Conor can throw a counter left hand and it still hits hard, I think he's got a shot.
Chandler's chin has always been a little iffy.
Yeah, it's been a little iffy, and he's there to be hit and there to be countered. So I think Conor could actually win as long as he's not like showing up for one last payday and is going to quit if he runs into any adversity. Which, if other people think, hey, he's going to quit the second he gets in there because he's got too much money in the bank, I'm not really going to argue with that. So,
no. And I guess that's just one other thing is I don't think he's looking for a payday if he does get in there. He already has all this money elsewhere. It's maybe he's getting in because he actually wants to fight.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So we'll see.
Yeah. Yep. Interesting times ahead, though, I think, regardless of what we're getting ourselves into with what we talked about today. I mean, England pay-per-view, kind of return, they show out for the England pay-per-view cards and a Conor card. Maybe it's a bad card, but at least you get Conor. There's at least some novelty to that. You never know what's going to happen in the build-up. So we got 300 is itching closer. We have one more episode until UFC 300 preview. So we're getting really close to 300. Some exciting times ahead. I know last couple of weeks have been dim, and I'm sure people aren't thrilled with the UFC at this moment. But I'm optimistic of what's coming down the pipe for the UFC, and that gives us some good juicy episodes in the future as well.
And even post 300, the UFC Fight Night main events start getting much better again. So,
yep. The fact is they burnt a lot of main events on 300.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Like once we get past the milestone, we'll see.
Yep. Hopefully they heat up, and that gives us a lot more to talk about in terms of previewing and recapping fights as well. But for anyone that stuck through an hour and 10 of today's UFC Atlantic City card, and I think we had some interesting news topics to discuss today. I don't think we were just pulling random stuff out to talk about, but I think the things we talked about actually had importance, which took a little bit of work. But thank you to anyone who tuned in and sat through with us today. Make sure you go to vendettasportsmedia.com for written articles for every sport, but I'll also have some UFC preview stuff out for this weekend's card. If you want some deeper thoughts, and the rest of the main card will be on that as well. So always go and check those out. But like I said, thank you for watching, and we will be back next week.